For the record, state your name
My name is Nick Stevens.
and tell me a little bit about your faith.
My faith as a transgender Catholic is very important to me and the core of who I am. Some of my biggest supporters have been people who have identified as Catholic my whole life. When I originally came out to them, they were some of the first people to tell me the things that I truly believe God needed me to hear. They said things like, God made you in his image and he knows how you identify. And, you know, those things are, I will forever be grateful for because they've, had my back 100% from the very beginning.
So the church definitely plays an important role in your life and has through your transition. Do you want to say anything else about that?
Very much so. I went to a Catholic college, and it was one of the most inclusive and welcoming spaces I've been a part of. It was sponsored by the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet, and their motto that was all over campus was love thy neighbor without distinction. So the root and very core of the Catholic Church to me is based on the values of non-discrimination and not judging one another based on differences that we may normally judge each other on. I'm currently in a Catholic volunteer program based on the values of social justice, intentional community, simple living, all values that I think make our world a better place and are values that the Catholic Church believes in. And they welcomed me with open arms.
And so tell me a little bit more about that program. What are, who sponsors it? What is it called? And what role does it currently play in the practice of your faith?
Yeah, so the volunteer program is with the Sisters of Loretto. And we live in an intentional community in Washington, D.C. And really, they focus on the values of simple living, intentional community, social justice. And so I have housemates that all have passions that are different but centered around the social justice values, and really focus on this idea of non-discrimination, of including people who are at the margins, are normally oppressed. And a lot of times that is the LGBT community. And so to feel an inclusive and welcoming space in a church or a community that our culture so often depicts as exclusive is something that encourages me to share my story and to also make this space welcoming and inclusive for others.
So you talk a lot about the context of social justice as as a trans person. Tell me a little bit more about how that justice applies to you personally.
For me personally, I think I try to live the value of social justice, of inclusion in my everyday life. I think a lot of times people struggle or they ask the question, how can I be involved in social justice, or what can I do? And I always tell them, or I advocate and say, in your everyday life, you can do this. You see someone on the street that most people are ignoring. You can encounter them. You can ask them how their day is going. You can say hello. Just that simple act of solidarity with someone who is normally seen as the outcast is, I think, the very heart of what social justice means, and what it means to be social justice minded.
What would you say to other trans people who are struggling to reconcile their faith and their faith practice with who they are as a person?
Yeah, I think the biggest thought that got me through my biggest times of struggle were, number one, my relationship with God is my relationship with God. And so reconciling that relationship doesn't have to be within the context of a church or a certain religion. My first steps were just going back and talking to them to that higher power. It wasn't, exactly finding a spot in a certain denomination. So I think that was the first big step in my life. And really, I think the other thing is finding a community that has those same beliefs, values that you also have. For me, it was the social justice and inclusive atmosphere of a small liberal arts Catholic college. But it can be, a number of different spaces that are welcome and opening.
What challenges have you faced as you move? I mean, not necessarily by the faith itself, but you obviously are open, trans Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
What challenges do all of those identities together have brought to you in both in community and in your practice, the faith practice?
I feel blessed and very grateful to not have had extreme or very overt forms of discrimination, happen in my life. But I would say with that, I think a part of it is because out on the street, I am people perceive me to be a cisgender male. And so my struggle is in what times and in what opportunities can I stand up and use that space to advocate for other people who aren't perceived as, fitting into culture or society.
And what would you say to those, who are non-T or LGBT for that matter, around the ability to reconcile faith and sexual orientation and gender identity?
I think the biggest piece of advice I have is to have an open heart and an open mind, and just to encounter others and encounter other people in ways that you may not always get the chance to do. Every LGBT person is just that. They're a person, and that's really what it boils down to. And if we're open and willing to encounter people as people that are deserving of respect and dignity like everyone is, then I think people can come to better understandings of each other and why a person believes one thing and not another.
Final question. Have you ever had to take a moral stand around both your faith and your gender identity, sexual orientation? Why? What was it about? Why then and not before that? And what was your reaction as well as the reaction of those around you?
Yeah. Like I stated previously, I'm very grateful and very blessed to have always been a part of very welcome and opening Catholic and inclusive Catholic communities. So the first thing for me that comes to mind was when I just came out as a transgender male to my local Catholic parish, to the priest, and I told him that this was something that I, had at the time I was really struggling with my gender identity, and I told him I was really considering identifying as a transgender male, and he welcomed me with open arms and even called me a brother in Christ. And it was just this moment of like pure acceptance and what I really believe, like how the gospel tells us to live and welcoming one another. And so I'm very fortunate that I feel like in my moral stand, I stood up for who I was as a person, and I was welcomed and accepted. And I hope in sharing my story that it encourages others to stand up and also own their identity and especially in spaces where they feel safe and can feel included and welcomed.
Is there any final thoughts you have about your identity as a man in faith that you think will be worth for others to hear?
I think it's important for everyone to just encounter one another with love and acceptance and welcome, whether that's someone who may be painted as closed-minded or not as welcoming, or even very open and very welcoming. If we can all just take a step back and try to understand each other better, then I really think the world could be a better place.
Well, thank you so much for participating, and we look forward to your continued work.